Hey guys, and welcome back to the ASX Investor channel, and welcome to another interview. Today, we will be revisiting the Race Oncology story. ASX RAC is a fascinating company. We've discussed them in detail before, and today we're very excited to be welcoming back to the channel Dr. Daniel Tillett. He's the Chief Scientific Officer and Executive Director on the board at Race Oncology. They're coming off the back of some fantastic interim results for some of the work in the FTO space, as well as a great quarterly update providing that overview across all of the facets of the three-pillar strategy. There's a lot to unpack. Of course, we know that Zantrene has the opportunity to really make a big tangible difference for many people suffering from cancer around the world. So it's an exciting space and one that we really do hope will continue to grow moving forward. Daniel, congratulations on a big past quarter. Welcome back to the channel.
Thank you. That was very exciting to be able to release the information that we released yesterday. So it's very exciting.
I'm really looking forward to unpacking all of the news and the data that came for it. But of course, we know the story. FTO, it's a fairly new topic of discussion and research over the past few years. City of Hope scanned all 260,000 compounds that they had available. And it just happened that Zantrene was first in class, best in class, the most potent FTO inhibitor available. It's an amazing story. Can you give that overview about how this has all come about and the current state of play where Race sits at the moment?
Yeah, so it's quite an amazing story. So as you mentioned, the City of Hope did a study they published last year, about 12 months ago, or a little over 12 months ago, where they did a big screen through all the drugs that were in the National Cancer Institute. And because Zantrene had been worked on by the National Cancer Institute in the 1980s, that was in their library. And so they were able to, when they screened they were looking for any drug that could inhibit this protein called FTO, which stands for, it's actually got two names. One of it's called FATSO, from a fused toe mutant mouse. And the other one comes from its association with obesity through genetic studies. But it turns out that this particular protein is a key protein in the development of cancer, and particularly two parts of cancer that are really difficult to deal with, which is, first one is when the cancer spreads around the body, metastases. That step is a really dangerous step if you're a patient. So a tumor that's localized to one area can be usually surgically removed and the patient can be cured. Once it metastasizes around the body, then it's very difficult to treat. And the second thing that happens, and they both happen together at the same time, is the cancers develop resistance. Those two things are linked, and that turn out to be driven called M6A RNA epigenetics, which is a complicated things are turned into proteins inside the cell, and that's involved in this process of cancer. And so as a consequence, this really super exciting area, only just been discovered in the last few years. And so everyone out there right now in the labs are looking around for drugs that can actually target this pathway. Turns out FTO is right in the middle of this pathway, controls, regulates. Zantrene turns out to be a very potent inhibitor of that protein. It's like being in the right place at the right time with the right drug. Just an amazing outcome towards focusing on this particular opportunity. And so the results we released yesterday were part of that process, particularly focusing on melanoma. And the reason why melanoma is FTO, the protein that our drug inhibits, is overexpressed in about half of all melanomas. That was also known, and so it's a really great opportunity to go in and have a look. And held up when we did the first study, first study in melanoma for probably 30 years. It found out that it's actually really, really sensitive to Bisantrene, or some of the cells are really sensitive to Bisantrene. Yeah. So yeah, really exciting results. And exciting is there was a correlation between the melanoma cells that overexpressed FTO were much more sensitive to Zantrene than those that didn't produce very much FTO. And so you get that nice correlation between a molecular marker that you can measure, mechanism of action, and the response. And that's exactly what you want to see with a targeted agent. Perfect. I couldn't ask for anything better along those lines.
I think also what's really interesting about Zantrene is its opportunity to work across a range of different cancers as well. FTO expression is across many different cancers. Of course, precision oncology often just treats one or focus on a couple of subsets of cancers. Can you speak about the opportunity as well that FTO presents on that type of scale?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most exciting things about the whole FTO opportunity, is that it is across pan cancers, across all the known cancers. that have been checked. We've had 25 different cancers that have been checked, not by us, but by other investigators out there, and every one that's been looked at, there's been a subset of those cancers that produce and respond to FTO, that are overproducing FTO and will respond to an FTO inhibitor, which is a fantastic opportunity to have. So that turns the drug from being as you mentioned, a lot of the precision oncology drugs are targeted at a very small, precise subtype of one particular cancer. And that can be okay. You can have a very narrow indication, can still be a viable drug, but there's kind of a limit to the commercial potential of one of those drugs. Zantrene really has no limit on the upside there. It's across so many different cancers, so many indications, all the majors, and particularly the combination potential. So the discovery that overexpression of FTO drives resistance to other cancer drugs. When you inhibit FTO, you then make that cancer sensitive again to those drugs. So you can take a drug, for example, one of the immune checkpoint inhibitors, that the cancer is resistant to those immune checkpoint inhibitors. You inhibit FTO, and then suddenly that cancer then becomes sensitive to it. So you can actually switch, and that's an amazing background, because overall the immune checkpoint inhibitors are fantastic drugs, but they only work in about 1 in 10 patients. So there's 90% patients don't get any benefit from them, and Zantrene might be one of the things that makes the difference.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal opportunity. I'm sure investors will continue to watch as well for the opportunity, both with the synergies with those checkpoint inhibitors as well as a single agent too. Love to hear, of course, that brings us towards now the results from yesterday. There's a number of different preclinical trials, but yesterday we got some interim results for the melanoma side. Can you speak about what you've been seeing so far and why it's so important for the story for ASX RAC?
Yeah, so it's basically, this was the initial stage. So the overall project is going to look at combinations of drugs and in animal work, and so the initial work before you begin any of those things is just to check to see how does Zantrene perform on its own in your particular cancer of interest. In this case, melanoma. Turns out that it performed far better than we were expecting at really low concentrations, as low as 22 nanomolar, which probably doesn't mean very much to most people, but it's an extremely low concentration, far below the dose that causes side effects in patients. And on its own. And the other thing that really was exciting was that this correlation between the cancers that overexpressed more FTO were the ones that were most sensitive to Zantrene, which is exactly what we want to see. When you've got a precision oncology drug targeting that molecule, you want to see that molecule's important, that protein's important for the response in the cancers, and that's what we saw. So between those two things were quite amazing. The other thing that's probably not quite so well, I guess maybe not been picked up by the market so much, is there wasn't any of all the other mutations that occurred that are important for melanoma, the BRAF and NRAS. There wasn't any correlation between mutations in those genes. And they're really important because it means that Zantrene is working in a completely different mechanism and can overcome cancers that are resistant to the various other treatments that target those particular molecular markers. So, the KRAS or BRAF drugs that are out there are really amazing for melanoma, but they stop working as the cancer develops resistance. And so we have an opportunity there to work in those types of cancers as well.
I think just even having a look at that headline figure as well, up to 60 times more sensitive in those cells that are expressing FTO. You must have been very excited seeing those results.
Well, it was when I saw the difference. So to me, we have a collaboration. They send us the results. And then I go, wow, I saw this. And then I looked at the correlation between the FTO levels of expression and the sensitivity. And I go, wow, this is really something. It's exactly what we would want to see in a study. And the nice thing about that is we didn't know the sensitivity work was done first without knowing what the FTO status was, and then the FTO status was done afterwards. So it was kind of like a blind result. So you got which cells were most sensitive, and then it turns out that the FTO correlated with that. So very interesting result. Of course, there's always going to be some cancers that are different. There's some cancers that actually had a high level of FTO, but that didn't respond. And that's what you'll see with all molecular markers, particularly. And the reason for that is some cancers overexpress these transporters, they're called, that pump all the drug out of the cell And if you have those, then no drug can get inside the cell, and therefore you're not going to be able to inhibit the protein that you're trying to target. You can often overcome that, though, just by increasing the dose and using a high dose of the drug. But all of those things go together with that. No drug works on everything. If you have a drug that works on everything, then you know that there's something wrong with the work. So it's just the way cancers are always different. You don't need to have it work on everything. If it works on even a small percentage of cancers, if you've got a good marker and it's good correlation, that's all you need for a commercially viable product.
And there is plenty of work still going on under that pillar one. Of course, there's still plenty to look forward to on the melanoma side, but the renal cell, clear cell carcinoma, as well as extramedullary work too. Are you able to just provide some of those key milestones that investors should look for underneath all of this FTO work?
Yeah, so it's very similar preclinical programs undergoing with clear cell renal cell carcinoma, which from a whole bunch of evidence in the literature suggests FTO is very important in that particular cancer. And the major driver mutation of those cancers is not FTO, but and so they form a nice, clean population. It's also a really difficult cancer to treat because it's diagnosed often very late. There's often no symptoms until it's stage 4 and it's already spread all around the body. And so at that stage, it's very difficult to treat the patient. So this is a fantastic opportunity for us to go after as an indication. It's a lot of unmet clinical need for this particular cancer. So we'll have results for that very early Q4, so you can expect sort of in the next month to month and a half. It's obviously, as we come out of lockdown here in New South Wales, it's going to make life a lot easier to work in the lab, and so we should hopefully have those results sooner rather than later. The EMD, we're doing preclinical animal work to support and cellular work to support the upcoming clinical trial, which is underway. And that work's progressing quite well. Very exciting results there. So that's another FTO directed indication, but in acute myeloid leukemia. So a leukemia where Bisantrene has a lot of historical support for. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to come through to there. Plus we also have a whole bunch of work coming around the molecular mechanism of how it doesn't damage the heart, Zantrene, and that's very exciting as we can actually go back in and actually answer the question, why doesn't this drug damage the heart? And that has a lot of potential for a lot of opportunities around that. If we know why that is, you'll know when to use it and where to use it. And so similar thing, unrelated potentially to FTO. And then the final one is obviously our clinical trials that are ongoing. So we've treated the first patient in Israel. We've announced that, I should say. That progressing as expected. Continuing along, and we'll be able to update the market as we get to the end of the dose escalation stage. So all going well, and the other EMD trial is well underway, all going very well. Everything's on track, and we should be able to announce towards the end of the quarter about how that's all going. So yeah, everything's progressing well. Amazing amount of work going on at the company, and a lot for the shareholders to look forward to. So over the next short period of time.
Of course, along with your internal work as well, you are also Race Oncology's largest shareholder. I'd love to hear, with your shareholder hat on, what is it that gets you really excited about the opportunity for Zantrene and ASX RAC up ahead?
Well, yeah, the thing that I think is the first-in-class, best-in-class drug that we currently have, it's fantastic, the first in a space. You get to create, you have all the opportunity ahead of you to build upon that. And the first drug into a class often makes the most money in that particular class. Not always, but usually first or second is where it is. It's very much more difficult if you're the 300th drug in a class. You're really going to struggle to try and get attention either from the market, from other pharmaceutical companies for partnering or purchasing outcomes. And then the final one is just in the marketplace. You're trying to sell it, you're trying to compete against all these other drugs. So it became really difficult. The only upside to being 300th is the market's very familiar with the space and can then, they know, this is a good space to be in. So unfortunately, with being first in class for this really new indication means a lot of our investors or potential investors don't understand what the opportunity is. But all I can say is, do your own research, look into it, and you'll see, wow, it's an amazing opportunity. And if you find that all too difficult, go and have a look at what Mason has to say about it. He's got his own channel. He talks about all of this sort of stuff as well. So he's one of our shareholders, and has a scientific background, but he likes to be able to talk about all the various factors that are going into RAC and why he's so excited about it.
And you did touch on it there. Of course, first in class, best in class is a fantastic advantage to have. But along with the development, you of course have the education piece as well. What are some of those aspects that you think the market might not have grasped onto yet about Zantrene and the opportunity that it presents?
I think because we came from a drug that historically was an old chemotherapeutic drug, a large amount of the market still thinks we're an old chemotherapeutic. And they haven't yet grasped that we've moved to a precision oncology at a non-chemotherapeutic, very low dose, targeted to a particular mutation that can be assayed for. That is a completely different, about as different as you can get in oncology space. And it's very unusual that you have that transition. It just doesn't normally happen. And so people aren't used to this idea that suddenly a company can be doing one thing and then overnight almost they're suddenly doing something completely different. But that's the power of science. When the right data comes along, and you have to listen to that data and respond to it. And when the data came out of the City of Hope, we looked at that data and we said, this is an opportunity that comes along once in a lifetime. We have to run with it and go with it. So we still retain the chemotherapeutic as under the pillar 3, but we have this massive opportunity in FTO ahead of us, which is just so much larger than the chemotherapeutic opportunity could ever have been. Orders of magnitude higher.
And so this past 12 months truly has been transformative. It's about 12 months since the strategy was announced. When you're looking forward 12 months ahead from here, where will Race Oncology be and what are you most looking forward to?
I'm most looking forward to being able to get into the clinic and demonstrate this will be the thing that will make the difference. At the moment, people are sitting on the sidelines because there's no clinical data to support in patients that FTO is a viable target. There's all this indirect evidence, there's historical data that supports it, but there's no direct data yet to support that. As soon as we get into the clinic, do the first clinical trial, and if we see results that line up with that changes everything. And that's going to be the key thing that will happen, I think, over the next 12 months, is we'll start to see that data come through. As we have that data, suddenly everything will go from, oh, this is a nice idea, to, wow, this is an amazing opportunity. I think that will change perception not only at the investor side, but also within the industry as well. And then that becomes something that everyone will get excited about. And they'll say, Race happens to be the lead company in this super exciting space that got clinical data to support that. We want to get involved in that. So that's what we want to see the large pharmaceutical companies doing. We want to be in this space. Who can we get? Well, Race is out there available, so let's go and talk to them. That's the hope, and that's the aim.
It is the exciting opportunity. I'd love to ask you the final question. We know that Race Oncology has got a really passionate investor base. So for those longer term investors who might have been following the ASX RAC story, or potentially some newer investors who might be looking at Race Oncology now, did you have any final messages or reflections you'd like to share with them?
This is one where it's very difficult if you're an investor or a small investor to be more get more knowledge than the institutional investors. They get access. They've got professionals that can do research. This is actually one where the small investor can actually do their own research and get out ahead of the institutional investors. This is an opportunity that doesn't often exist, and it exists because the institutional investors don't yet really know about this M6A opportunity and the FTO opportunity. So the small investor can put in the time. They can put in 20 hours of research of their own, look at all the scientific papers, look at all the data that's out there and come to their own conclusion. The institutional investors don't have 20 hours of their time. They've got to look at dozens of different companies and they can't put in that time. So you actually have a competitive advantage over the institutional investors, the small investor, because you've got time on your side. So I would encourage anyone who's even slightly interested in the space to go off and do your own research. Look at it. If you've got questions, contact us either via social media or via directly, and make your own, do your own research and come to your own conclusion. And there's an opportunity there that rarely comes along, I think, in the ASX space. Normally, the big guys get all the benefits, and the little guys are tagging along behind. This is the opposite way around. amazing opportunity. It won't be forever.
That is the Race Oncology story. It's ASX RAC. If you guys are new around here, welcome. We make daily videos. So hit that like button. Feel free to share it out if you did enjoy it, and make sure you've subscribed and turned your bell notifications on. It is always a pleasure catching up with you. Dr. Daniel Tillett, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on the success of Race, but we'll continue to watch where ASX RAC heads from here.
Thank you very much.